Metamorphoses by Ovid, written 1 ACE, translated by Sir Samuel Garth, John Dryden, et al. Book VII. The story of Medea and Jason. The Argonauts now stemmed the foaming tide, and to Arcadia's shore their course applied, where sightless Phineus spent his age in grief, but Boreas' sons engage in relief. And those unwelcome guests, the odious race of Harpies, from the monarch's table chase. With Jason then they greater toil sustain, and Phasis' slimy banks at last they gain. Here boldly they demand the golden prize of Scythia's king, who sternly thus replies, that mighty labours they must first o'ercome, or sail their Argo thence unfreighted home. Meanwhile Medea, seized with fierce desire, by reason strives to quench the raging fire, but strives in vain. Some god, she said, withstands, and reason's baffled counsel countermands. What unseen power does this disorder move? 'Tis love at least is like what men call love. Else wherefore should the king's commands appear to me too hard? But so indeed they are. Why should I for a stranger fear, lest he should perish, whom I did but lately see? His death or safety, what are they to me? Wretch, from thy virgin breast this flame expel, and soon, could I, all would then be well. But love, resistless love, my soul invades, discretion this affection that persuades. I see the right, and I approve it too. Condemn the wrong, and yet the wrong pursue. Why, royal maid, shouldst thou desire to wed a wanderer, and court a foreign bed? Thy native land, though barbarous, can present a bridegroom worth a royal bride's content. And whether this adventurer lives or dies, in fate and fortune's fickle pleasure lies. Yet may be live, for to the powers above a virgin led by no impulse of love, so just a suit may for the guiltless move. Whom would not Jason's valor, youth, and blood invite? Or could these merits be withstood, at least his charming person must incline the hardest heart. I'm sure 'tis so with mine. Yet, if I help him not, the flaming breath of bulls and earth-born foes must be his death. Or should he through these dangers force his way, at last he must be made the dragon's prey. If no remorse for such distress I feel, I am a tigress, and my breast is steel. Why do I scruple then to see him slain, and with the tragic scene my eyes profane? My magic's art employ, not to assuage the salvages, but to inflame their rage? His earth-born foes to fiercer fury move, an accessory to his murder prove? The gods forbid, but prayers are idle breath, when action only can prevent his death. Shall I betray my father and the state to intercept a rambling hero's fate, who may sail off next hour, and saved from harms, by my assistance bless another's arms? Whilst I, not only of my hopes bereft, but to unpitied punishment am left. If he is false, let the ingrateful bleed. But no such symptoms in his looks I read. Nature would ne'er have lavished so much grace upon his person, if his soul were base. Besides, he first shall plight his faith, and swear by all the gods. What therefore canst thou fear? Medea, haste, from danger set him free. Jason shall thy eternal debtor be, and thou his queen, with sovereign estate installed, by Grecian dames the kind preserver called. Hence, idle dreams, by lovesick fancy fed, wilt thou, Medea, by vain wishes led, to sister, brother, father bid adieu, forsake thy country's gods, and country too? My father's harsh, my brother but a child, my sister rivals me, my country's wild, and for its gods the greatest of them all inspires my breast, and I obey his call. That great endearments I forsake is true, but greater far the hopes that I pursue. the pride of having saved the youths of Greece, each life more precious than our golden fleece. A nobler soil by me shall be possessed. I shall see towns with arts and manners blessed, and what I prize above the world beside, enjoy my Jason. And when once his bride, be more than mortal, and to gods allied. They talk of hazards I must first sustain, of floating islands jostling in the main, our tender bark exposed to dreadful shocks, of fierce Charybdis' gulf and Scylla's rocks, where breaking waves and whirling eddies row, and ravenous dogs that in deep caverns howl. Amidst these terrors, while I lie possessed of him I love, and lean on Jason's breast, in tempests unconcerned I will appear, or only for my husband's safety fear. Didst thou say husband? Canst thou so deceive thyself, fond maid, and thy own cheat believe? In vain thou strivest to varnish o'er thy shame, and grace thy guilt with wedlock's sacred name. Pull off the cozening mask, and in time discover and avoid the fatal crime. She ceased. The Graces now, with kind surprise, and virtue's lovely train before her eyes, present themselves, and vanquished Cupid flies. She then retires to Hecate's shrine, that stood far in the covert of a shady wood. She finds the fury of her flames assuaged, but seeing Jason there again they raged. Blushes and paleness did by turns invade her tender cheeks, and secret grief betrayed. As fire that sleeping under ashes lies, fresh blown and roused, does up in blazes rise, so flamed the virgin's breast, now kindled by her lover's sparkling eyes. For chance that day had with uncommon grace adorned the lovely youth, and through his face displayed an air so pleasing as might charm a goddess and a vestal's bosom warm. Her ravished eyes survey him o'er and o'er, as some gay wonder never seen before. Transported to the skies she seems to be, and thinks she gazes on a deity. But when he spoke, and pressed her trembling hand, and did with tender words her aid demand, with vows and oaths to make her soon his bride, she wept a flood of tears, and thus replied: I see my error, yet to ruin move, nor owe my fate to ignorance, but love. Your life I'll guard, and only crave of you to swear once more, and to your oath be true. He swears by Hecate, he would all fulfill, and by her grandfather's prophetic skill, by everything that doubting love could press, his present danger and desired success. She credits him, and kindly does produce enchanted herbs, and teaches him their use. Their mystic names and virtues he admires, and with his booty joyfully retires. The dragon's teeth transformed to men. Impatient for the wonders of the day, Aurora drives the loitering stars away. Now Mars's mount the pressing people fill. The crowd below, the nobles crown the hill. The king himself high-throned above the rest, with ivory scepter and in purple dressed. Forthwith the brass-hoofed bulls are set at large, whose furious nostrils sulphurous flame discharge. The blasted herbage by their breath expires, as forges rumble with excessive fires, and furnaces with fiercer fury glow, when water on the panting mass ye throw. With such a noise from their convulsive breast, through bellowing throats the struggling vapor pressed. Yet Jason marches up without concern, while on the adventurous youth the monsters turn. Their glaring eyes, and eager to engage, brandish their steel-tipped horns in threatening rage. With brazen hoofs they beat the ground, and choke the ambient air with clouds of dust and smoke. Each gazing Grecian for his champion shakes, while bold advances he securely makes through singeing blasts. Such wonders magic art can work, when love conspires and plays his part. The passive savages like statues stand, while he their dewlap strokes with soothing hand. To unknown yokes their brawny necks they yield. and like tame oxen plough the wandering field. The Colchians stare, the Grecians shout and raise their champion's courage with inspiring praise. Emboldened now on fresh attempts he goes, with serpent's teeth the fertile furrows sows. The glebe, fermenting with enchanted juice, makes the snake's teeth a human crop produce. For as an infant prisoner to the womb contented sleeps, till to perfection come, then does the cell's obscure confinement scorn. He tosses, throbs, and presses to be born. So, from the laboring earth, no single birth, but a whole troop of lusty youths rush forth. And what's more strange, with martial fury warmed, and for encounter all completely armed, in rank and file as they were sowed they stand, impatient for the signal of command. No foe but the Aemonian youth appears. At him they level their steel-pointed spears. His frighted friends who triumphed just before, with peals of sighs his desperate case deplore. And where such hardy warriors are afraid, what must the tender and enamored maid? Her spirit sink, the blood her cheek forsook. She fears, who for his safety undertook. She knew the virtue of the spells she gave, she knew the force, and knew her lover brave. But what's a single champion to an host? Yet scorning thus to see him tamely lost, her strong reserve of secret arts she brings, and last, her never-failing song she sings. Wonders ensue among his gazing foes, the massy fragment of a rock he throws. This charm in civil war engaged them all. By mutual wounds those earth-born brothers fall. The Greeks, transported with the strange success, leap from their seats the conqueror to caress, commend and kiss and clasp him in their arms. So would the kind contriver of the charms, but her, who felt the tenderest concern, honor condemns in secret flames to burn. Committed to a double guard of fame, awed by a virgin's and a princess's name. But thoughts are free and fancy unconfined. She kisses, courts, and hugs him in her mind. To favoring powers her silent thanks she gives, by whose indulgence her loved hero lives. One labor more remains, and though the last in danger far, surmounting all the past, that enterprise by fates in store was kept, to make the dragon sleep that never slept, whose crest shoots dreadful luster. From his jaws a triple tire of forked stings he draws. With fangs and wings of a prodigious size, such was the guardian of the golden prize. Yet him, besprinkled with Lethean dew, the fair enchantress into slumber threw. And then, to fix him thrice, she did repeat the rhyme that makes the raging winds entreat. In stormy seas can halcyon seasons make, turn rapid streams into a standing lake, while the soft guest his drowsy eyelids seals, the unguarded golden fleece the stranger steals, proud to possess the purchase of his toil, proud of his royal bride, the richer spoil. To see both prize and patroness he bore, and lands triumphant on his native shore. Old Aeson restored to youth. Aemonian matrons who their absence mourned rejoiced to see their prosperous sons return. Rich curling fumes of incense feast the skies. An hecatomb of voted victims dies, with gilded horns and garlands on their head, and all the pomp of death to the altar led. Congratulating bowls go briskly round, triumphant shouts and louder music drowned. Amidst these revels, why that cloud of care on Jason's brow, to whom the largest share of mirth was due? His father was not there. Aeson was absent, once the young and brave, now crushed with years and bending to the grave. At last withdrawn, and by the crowd unseen, pressing her hand with starting sighs between, he supplicates his kind and skillful queen. O patroness, preserver of my life, dear when my mistress and much dearer wife, your favors to so vast a sum amount, 'tis past the power of numbers to recount. Or could they be to computation brought, the history would a romance be thought, and yet unless you add one favor more, greater than all that you conferred before, but not too hard for love and magic skill. Your past are thrown away, and Jason's wretched still. The morning of my life is just begun, but my declining father's race is run. From my large stock retrench the long arrears, and added them to expiring Aeson's years. Thus spake the generous youth, and wept the rest, moved with the piety of his request. To his aged sire such filial duty shown, so different from her treatment of her own, but still endeavoring her remorse to hide, she checked her rising sighs, and thus replied. How could the thought of such inhuman wrong escape, said she, from pious Jason's tongue? Does the whole world another Jason bear, whose life Medea can to yours prefer? Or could I with so dire a change of dispense, Hecate will never join in that offence. Unjust is the request you make, and I in kindness your petition shall deny. Yet she that grants not what you do implore shall yet essay to give Jason more. Find means to increase the stock of Aeson's years without retrenchment of your life's arrears, provided that the triple goddess join a strong confederate in my bold design. Thus was her enterprise resolved, but still 3 tedious nights are wanting to fulfill the circling crescents of the increasing moon. Then, in the height of her nocturnal noon, Medea steals from the court. Her ankles bare, her garments closely girt, but loose her hair. Thus sallied like a solitary sprite, she traverses the terrors of the night. Men, beasts, and birds in soft repose lay charmed. No boisterous wind the mountain woods alarmed, nor did those walks of love, the myrtle trees, of amorous zephyr, hear the whispering breeze. All elements chained in unactive rest. No sense but what the twinkling stars expressed. To them that only waked, she rears her arm, and thus commences her mysterious charms. She turned her thrice about as oft she threw on her pale tresses the nocturnal dew. Then, yelling thrice a most enormous sound, her bare knee bended on the flinty ground. O night, said she, thou confident and guide of secrets, such as darkness ought to hide, ye stars and moon that, when the sun retires, support his empire with succeeding fires, and thou, great Hecate, friend to my design, songs, muttering spells, your magic forces join, and thou, O earth, the magazine that yields the midnight sorcerer's drugs, skies, mountains, fields. Ye watery powers of fountain, stream, and lake, ye sylvan gods and gods of night, awake, and generously your parts in my adventure take. Oft by your aid swift currents I have led through wandering banks back to their fountainhead, transformed the prospect of the briny deep, made sleeping billows rave and raving billows sleep, made clouds or sunshine, tempests rise or fall, and stubborn lawless winds obey my call, with muttered words disarm the viper's jaw, up by the roots vast oaks and rocks could draw. Make forests dance and trembling mountains come, like malefactors to receive their doom. Earth groan and frighted ghosts forsake their tomb. Thee, Cynthia, my resistless rhymes drew on, when tinkling cymbals strove my voice to drown. Nor stronger Titan could their force sustain, in full career compelled to stop his wane. Now could Aurora's virgin blush avail, with poisonous herbs I turned her roses pale. The fury of the fiery bulls I broke, their stubborn necks submitting to my yoke. And when the sons of earth with fury burned, their hostile rage upon themselves I turned. The brothers made with mutual wounds to bleed, and by their fatal strife my lover freed. And while the dragon slept to distant Greece, through cheated guards conveyed the golden fleece. But now to bolder action I proceed, of such prevailing juices now have need, that withered years back to their bloom can bring, and in dead winter raise a second spring. And you'll perform it, you will, for lo, the stars with sparkling fires presage as bright success to my desires. And now another happy omen see, a chariot drawn by dragons waits for me. With these last words, he leaps into the wain, strokes the snakes' necks, and shakes the golden rein, that signal given thy mounter to the skies. And now beneath the fruitful Tempe lies, whose stories she ransacks, then to Crete she flies. There Ossa, Pelion, Othrys, Pindus, all to the fair ravisher a booty fall. The tribute of their verdure she collects, nor proud Olympus' heights his plants protects. Some by the roots she plucks, the tender tops of others with her culling sickle crops. Nor could the plunder of the hills suffice, down to the humble vales and meads she flies. Apidanus, Amphosis, the next rape sustain, nor could Epinius' bank escape. Through Bebe's marsh and through the border ranged, whose pasture Glaucus to a Triton changed. Now the 9th day and 9th successive night had wandered at the restless rover's flight. Meanwhile her dragons fed with no repast, but her exhaling simples' odorous blast their tarnished scales and wrinkled skins had cast. At last returned before her palace gate, quitting her chariot on the ground she sate. The sky her only canopy of state. All conversation with her sex she fled, shunned the caresses of the nuptial bed. 2 altars next of grassy turf she rears, this Hecate's name that youth's inscription bears. With forest boughs and vervain these she crowned, then delves a double trench in lower ground, and sticks a black fleeced ram that ready stood, and drench the ditches with devoted blood. New wine she pours, and milk from the udder warm, with mystic murmurs to complete the charm. And subterranean deities alarm to the stern king of ghosts she next applied, and gentle Proserpine, his ravished bride, that for old Aeson with the laws of fate they would dispense, and lengthen his short date. Thus, with repeated prayers, she long assails the infernal tyrant, and at last prevails. Then calls to have decrepit Aeson brought, and stupefies him with a sleeping draught. On earth his body like a corpse extends, then charges Jason and his waiting friends to quit the place, that no unhallowed eye into her art's forbidden secrets pry. This done, the enchantress with her locks unbound about her altars trips a frantic round. Piecemeal the consecrated wood she splits, and dips the splinters into the bloody pits, and hurls them on the piles. The sleeping sire she lustrates thrice with sulphur, water, fire. In a large cauldron now the medicine boils, compounded of her late collected spoils, blending into the mesh the various powers of wonder-working juices, roots, and flowers. With gems in the eastern ocean sail refined, and such as ebbing tides had left behind. To them the midnight's pearly dew she flings, a screech owl's carcass and ill-boding wings. Nor could the wizard wolf's warm entrails scape, that wolf who counterfeits a human shape. Then, from the bottom of her conjuring bag, snake's skins and liver of a long-lived stag. Last, a crow's head to such an age arrived, that he had now 9 centuries survived. These, and with these 1,000 more that grew in sundry soils, into her pot she threw. Then with a withered olive bow she rakes the bubbling broth. The bow fresh verdure takes, green leaves at first the perished plants surround. When the next minute with ripe fruit were crowned, the foaming juices now the brink overswell. The barren heath, wherever the liquor fell, sprang out with vernal grass, and all the pride of blooming May. When this Medea spied, she cuts her patient's throat, the exhausted blood recruiting with her new enchanted flood, while at his mouth and through his opening wound a double inlet her infusion found. His feeble frame resumes a youthful air, a glossy brown his hoary beard and hair. The meager paleness from his aspect fled, and in its room sprang up a florid red. Through all his limbs a youthful vigor flies. his emptied arteries swell with fresh supplies. Gazing spectators scarce believe their eyes, but Aeson is the most surprised to find a happy change in body and in mind, in sense and constitution the same man as with his 40th active year began. Bacchus, who from the clouds this wonder viewed, Medea's method instantly pursued, and his indulgent nurse's youth renewed. The death of Peleus. Thus far obliging love employed her art, but now revenge must act a tragic part. Medea feigns a mortal quarrel bred betwixt her and the partner of her bed. On this pretence to Peleus' court she flies, who languishing with age and sickness lies. His guiltless daughters with inveigling wiles and well-dissembled friendship she beguiles. The strange achievements of her art she tells with Aeson's cure, and long on that she dwells, till them to firm persuasion she has won. The same for their old father may be done. For him they court her to employ her skill, and put upon the cure what price she will. At first she's mute, and with a grave pretense of difficulty holds them in suspense, then promises and bids them from the fold choose out a ram the most infirm and old, that so by fact their doubts may be removed, and first on him the operation proved. A wreath-horned ram is brought, so far overgrown with years, his age was to that age unknown, of sense too dull the piercing point to feel, and scarce sufficient blood to stain the steel. His carcass she into a cauldron threw, with drugs whose vital qualities she knew. His limbs grow less, he casts his horns and years, and tender bleatings strike their wondering ears. Then instantly leaps forth a frisking lamb, that seeks too young to graze a suckling dam. Thus the sisters, confirmed with the success, her promise with renewed entreaty press, to countenance the cheat 3 nights and days before the experiment the enchantress stays. Then into limpid order from the springs weeds and ingredients of no force she flings, with antique ceremonies for pretense, and rambling rhymes without a word of sense. Meanwhile the king with all his guards lay bound in magic sleep, scarce that of death so sound. The daughters now are by the sorceress led into his chamber, and surround his bed. Your father's health concerned, and can ye stay? Unnatural nymphs, why this unkind delay? Unsheathe your swords, dismiss his lifeless blood, and I'll recruit it with a vital flood. Your father's life and health is in your hand. And can ye thus like idle gazers stand? Unless you are of common sense bereft, if yet one spark of piety is left, dispatch a father's cure, and disengage the monarch from his toilsome load of age. Come, drench your weapons in his putrid gore. 'Tis charity to wound, when wounding will restore. Thus urged, the poor deluded maids proceed, betrayed by zeal to an inhumane deed, and in compassion make a father bleed. Yet she who had the kindest, tenderest heart is foremost to perform the bloody part. Yet, though to act the butchery betrayed, they could not bear to see the wounds they made. With looks averted, backward they advance, then strike and stab and leave blows to chance. Waking in consternation, he essays, weltering in blood, his feeble arms to raise, environed with so many swords. From whence this barbarous usage? What is my offense? What fatal fury? What infernal charm 'gainst a kind father does his daughters arm? Hearing his voice, as thunderstruck they stopped, their resolution and their weapons dropped. Medea then the mortal blow bestows, and that performed the tragic scene to close, his corpse into the boiling cauldron throws. Then, dreading the revenge that must ensue, high mounted on her dragon coach she flew, and in her stately progress through the skies, beneath her shady Pelion first she spies. With Othrys, that above the clouds did rise, with skilful Chiron's cave and neighboring ground, for old Cerymbus' strange escape renowned, by nymphs delivered when the world was drowned, who him with the unexpected wings supplied, when deluged hills a safe retreat denied. Aeolian Pitene on her left hand she saw, and there the statued dragon stand, with Ida's grove, where Bacchus, to disguise his son's bold theft, and to secure the prize, made the stolen steer a stag to represent. Coctysus's father's sandy monument, and fields that held the murdered sire's remains, where howling moor affrights the startled plains. Euryphileus's high town and towers defaced by Hercules and matrons more disgraced, with sprouting horns and signal punishment from Juno or resenting Venus sent. Then Rhodes, which Phoebus did so dearly prize, and Jove no less severely did chastise. For he, the wizard natives' poisoning sight, that use the farmer's hopeful crops to blight, in rage overwhelmed with everlasting night. Carthia's ancient walls come next in view, where once the sire almost a statue grew. With wonder, which a strange event did move, his daughter turned into a turtle dove. Then Hyres' lake and Tempe's field overran, famed for the boy who there became a swan. For there enamored Phyleus, like a slave, performed what tasks his paramour would crave. For presents he had mountain vultures caught, and from the desert a tame lion brought. Then a wild bull command to subdue, the conquered savage by the horns he threw. But mock so oft the treatment he disdains, and from the craving boy this prize detains. Then thus in choler the resenting lad, "Won't you deliver him? You wish you had." No sooner said, but in a peevish mood leapt from the precipice on which he stood. The standers by were struck with fresh surprise, instead of falling to behold him rise, a snowy swan, and soaring to the skies. But dearly the rash prank his mother cost, who ignorantly gave her son for lost. For his misfortune wept, till she became a lake, and still renowned with Hyres' name. Thence to Latona's isle, where once were seen, transformed to birds, a monarch and his queen. Far off she saw how old Cepheus mourned his son into a seal by Phoebus turned, and where astonished at a stranger's sight, Eumelus gazed on his winged daughter's flight. Aetolian Pluron she did next survey, where sons a mother's murder did essay. But sudden plumes the matron bore away. On her right hand Selene, a fair soil, fair, till Menephron there the beauteous hill attempted with foul incest to defile. Her harnessed dragons now direct she drives for Corinth, and at Corinth she arrives, where, if what old tradition tells be true, in former ages men from mushrooms grew. But here Medea finds her bed supplied during her absence by another bride, and hopeless to recover her lost game, she sets both bride and palace in a flame. Nor could a rival's death her wrath assuage, nor stopped at Creon's family her rage. She murders her own infants in despite to faithless Jason and in Jason's sight. Yet ere his sword could reach her, up she springs, securely mounted on her dragon's wings. The story of Aegeus. From hence to Athens she directs her flight, where Phineus, so renowned for doing right, where Periphas and Polyphemon's niece, soaring with sudden plumes, amazed the towns of Greece. Here Aegeus, so engaging she addressed, that first he treats her like a royal guest, then takes the sorceress for his wedded wife, the only blemish of his prudent life. Meanwhile, his son, from actions of renown, arrives at court, but to his sire unknown, Medea, to dispatch a dangerous heir. She knew him, did a poisonous draught prepare. Drawn from a drug was long reserved in store for desperate uses from the Scythian shore, that from Echidian monsters' jaws derived its origin, and this the cause. Through a dark cave a craggy passage lies to ours, ascending from the nether skies, through which by strength of hand Alcides drew chains Cerberus, who lagged and restive grew. With his bleared eyes our brighter day to view, thrice he repeated his enormous yell, with which he scares the ghosts and startles hell. At last, outrageous though compelled to yield, he sheds his foam and fury on the field, which, with its own and rankness of the ground, produced a weed by sorcerers renowned, the strongest constitution to confound, called aconite, because it can unlock all bars and force its passage through a rock. The pious father, by her wheedles won, presents this deadly potion to his son, who with the same assurance takes the cup, and to the monarch's health had drank it up. But in the very instant he applied the goblet to his lips, old Aegeus spied the ivory-hilted sword that graced his side. That certain signal of his son he knew, and snatched the bowl away. The sword he drew, resolved for such a son's endangered life to sacrifice the most perfidious wife. Revenge is swift, and her more active charms a whirlwind raised that snatched her from his arms. While conjured clouds their baffled sense surprise, she vanishes from their deluded eyes, and through the hurricane triumphant flies. The generous king, although overjoyed to find his son was safe, yet bearing still in mind the mischief by his treacherous queen designed, the horror of the deed, and then how near the danger drew, he stands congealed with fear. But soon that fear into devotion turns, with grateful incense every altar burns. Proud victims and unconscious of their fate stalk to the temple there to die in state. In Athens never had a day been found for mirth like that grand festival renowned. Promiscuously the peers and people dine, promiscuously their thankful voices join in songs of wit, sublimed by sprightly wine. To listening spheres their joint applause they raise, and thus resound their matchless Theseus's praise. Great Theseus, thee the Marathonian plain admires, and wears with pride the noble stain of the dire monster's blood, by valiant Theseus is slain. Now that Cromion's swains in safety sow, and reap their fertile field, to thee they owe. By thee the infested Epidaurian coast was cleared, and now can a free commerce boast. The traveler his journey can pursue, with pleasure the late dreadful valley view, and cry, here Theseus the grand robber slew. Cephasus's cry to his rescued shore, the merciless Procrusteus is no more. In peace, Eleusis Ceres' rights renew, since Theseus' sword the fierce Circean slew. By him the torturer Sinus was destroyed. Of strength but strength to barbarous use employed, that tops of the tallest pines to earth could bend, and thus in pieces wretched captives reigned. Inhuman Siren now has breathed his last, and now Alcathos' road securely passed, by Theseus slain and thrown into the deep. But earth nor sea his scattered bones would keep, which after floating long a rock became, still famous with Siren's hated name. When fame to count thy acts and years proceeds, thy years appear but ciphers to thy deeds. For thee, brave youth, as for our commonwealth, we pray, and drink in yours the public health. Your praise the senate and plebeians sing, with your loved name the court and cottage ring. You make our shepherds and our sailors glad, and not a house in this vast city sad. But mortal bliss will never come sincere. Pleasure may lead, but grief brings up the rear. While for his son's arrival's reveling joy, Aegeus and all his subjects does employ. While they for only costly feasts prepare, his neighboring monarch Minos threatens war. Weak in land forces, nor by sea more strong, but powerful in a deep resented wrong, for a son's murder armed with pious rage, yet prudently before he would engage to raise auxiliaries, resolved to sail, and with the powerful princes to prevail. First, Anaphe, then proud Astaphylia, gains by presence that, and this by threats obtains. Low Mycone, Simoleus, chalky soil, tall Sithno, Syros, flat Seriphos' isle, Paros with marble cliffs afar displayed, impregnable Sithonia, yet betrayed to a weak foe by a gold-admiring maid, who changed into a daw of sable hue, still hoards up gold and hides it from the view. But as these islands cheerfully combine, others refuse to embark in his design. Now leftward with an easy sail he bore, and prosperous passage to Enopia's shore. Enopia once, but now Aegina called, and with his royal mother's name installed by Aeacus, under whose reign did spring the Myrmidons, and now their reigning king. Down to the port amidst the rabble run the princes of the blood with Telamon. Peleus the next, and Phocus the third son, then Aeacus, although oppressed with years, to ask the cause of their approach appears. That question does the Gnosian's grief renew, and sighs from his afflicted bosom drew. Yet, after short solemn respite made, the ruler of the 100 cities said, "Assist our arms, raised for a murdered son. In this religious war no risk you run. Revenge the dead, for who refuse to give rest to their urns unworthy are to live." "What you bequest," thus Aeacus replies, "not I, but truth and common faith denies. Athens and we have long been sworn allies. Our leagues are fixed, confederate are our powers, and who declares themselves their foes are ours." Minos rejoins, "Your league shall dearly cost, yet mindful how much safer 'twas to boast than there to waste his forces and his fame. Before in field with his grand foe he came, parts without blows no long had left the shore, ere into port another navy bore. With Cephalus and all his jolly crew, the Isidies their old acquaintance knew. The princes bid him welcome, and in state conduct the hero to their palace gate, who entering seemed the charming maid to wear, as when in youth he paid his visit there. His right hand an olive branch he holds, and salutation past, the chief unfolds his embassy from the Athenian state, their mutual friendship, leagues of ancient date, their common danger, everything could wait concern, and his address successful make, strengthening his plea with all the charms of sense, and those with all the charms of eloquence. Then thus the king, "Like suitors do you stand for that assistance which you may command. Athenians, all our listed forces use. They're such as no bold service will refuse. And when ye have drawn them off, gods be praised, fresh legions can within our isle be raised, so stocked with people that we can prepare both for domestic and for distant war, ours or our friends' insulters to chastise. Long may ye flourish thus." The prince replies, "Strange transport seized me as I passed along, to meet so many troops and all so young, as if your army did of twins consist, yet amongst them my late acquaintance missed. Even all that to your palace did resort, when first you entertained me at your court, and cannot guess the cause from whence could spring so vast a change." Then thus the sighing king, "Illustrious guest, to my strange tale attend, of sad beginning, but a joyful end. The whole to a vast history would swell, I shall but half, and that confusedly tell. That race, whom so deservedly you admired, are all into their silent tombs retired. They fell, and falling how they shook my state, thought may conceive, but words can never relate." The story of ants changed to men. A dreadful plague from angry Juno came to scourge the land that bore her rival's name. Before her fatal anger was revealed, and teeming malice lay as yet concealed, all remedies we try, all medicines use, which nature could supply, or art produce. The unconquered foe derides the vain design, and art and nature foiled declare the cause divine. At first, we only felt the oppressive weight of gloomy clouds, then teeming with our fate and laboring to discharge unactive heat. But ere 4 moons alternate changes new, with deadly blasts the fatal south wind blew, infected all the air and poisoned as it flew. Our fountains too a dire infection yield, for crowds of vipers creep along the field, and with polluted gore and baneful steams taint all the lakes and venom all the streams. The young disease with milder force began, and raged on birds and beasts, excusing man. The laboring oxen fall before the plough, the unhappy ploughmen stare and wonder how. The tabed sheep with sickly bleatings pines, its wool decreasing as its strength declines. The warlike steed, by inward foes compelled, neglects his honours and deserts the field, unnerved and languid, seeks a base retreat, and at the manger groans, but wished a nobler fate. The stags forget their speed, the boars their rage, nor can the bears the stronger herds engage, and general faintness does invade them all, and in the woods and fields promiscuously they fall. The air receives the stench, and strange to say, the ravenous birds and beasts avoid the prey. The offensive bodies rot upon the ground, and spread the dire contagion all around. But now the plague grown to a larger size riots on man, and scorns a meaner prize. Intestine heats begin the civil war, and flushings first the latent flame declare, and breath inspired which seemed like fiery air. Their black, dry tongues are swelled and scarce can move, and short, thick sighs from panting lung are drove. They gape for air, with flattering hopes to abate their raging flames, but that augments their heat. No bed, no covering can the wretches bear, but on the ground exposed to open air. They lie and hope to find a pleasing coolness there. The suffering earth with that oppression cursed returns the heat which they imparted first. In vain physicians would bestow their aid, vain all their art and useless all their trade. And they, even they, who fleeting life recall, feel the same powers and undistinguished fall. If any prove so daring to attend his sick companion or his darling friend, the officious wretch sucks in contagious breath, and with his friend does sympathize in death. And now the care and hopes of life are past, they please their fancies and indulge their taste. At brooks and streams, regardless of their shame, each sex promiscuous strives to quench their flame. Nor do they strive in vain to quench it there, for thirst and life at once extinguished are. Thus in the brooks the dying bodies sink, but heedless still the rash survivors drink. So much uneasy down the wretches hate, they fly their beds to struggle with their fate. But if decaying strength forbids to rise, the victim crawls and rouse till on the ground he lies. Each shuns his bed as each would shun his tomb, and thinks the infection only lodged at home. Here, with fainting steps, does slowly creep over heaps of dead, and straight augments the heap. Again, while his strength and tongue prevailed, bewails his friend, and falls himself bewailed. This with imploring looks surveys the skies, the last ere office of his closing eyes, but finds the heavens implacable, and dies. What now? What employed my troubled mind? But only hopes my subject's fate to find. What place? Sorcerer, my weeping eyes survey. There in lamented heaps the vulgar lay, as acorns scatter when the winds prevail, or mellow fruit from shaken branches fall. You see that dome which rears its front so high, 'tis sacred to the monarch of the sky. How many there with unregarded tears and fruitless vows sent up successless prayers. There fathers for expiring sons implored, and there the wife bewailed her gasping lord. With pious offerings they appease the skies, but they, ere yet the atoning vapors rise, before the altars fall themselves a sacrifice. They fall, while yet their hands the gums contain, the gums surviving, but their offerers slain. The destined ox, with holy garlands crowned, prevents the blow and feels the expected wound. When I myself invoke the powers divine to drive the fatal pest from me and mine, when now the priest with hands uplifted stood, prepared to strike and shed the sacred blood, the gods themselves the mortal stroke bestow. The victim falls, but they impart the blow. Scarce was the knife with the pale purple stained, and no presages could by then obtained from putrid entrails where the infection reigned. Death stalked around with such resistless sway, the temples of the gods his force obey, and suppliants feel his stroke while yet they pray. Go now, said he, Your deities implore for fruitless aid, for I defied their power. Then with accursed malicious joy surveyed the very altars, stained with trophies of the dead. The rest, grown mad and frantic with despair, urge their own fate, and so prevent the fear. Strange madness that, when death pursued so fast, to anticipate the blow with impious haste. No decent honors to their urns are paid, nor could the graves receive the numerous dead. For, or they lay unburied on the ground, or unadorned a needy funeral found. All reverence past, all the fainting wretches fight for funeral piles, which were another's right. Unmourned they fall, for who survived to mourn? And sires and mothers unlamented burn. Parents and sons sustain an equal fate, and wandering ghosts their kindred shadows meet. The dead a larger space of ground require, nor are the trees sufficient for the fire. Despairing under grief's oppressive weight, and sunk by the tempestuous blasts of fate, O Jove, said I, if common fame says true, if e'er Aegina gave those joys to you, if e'er you lay enclosed in her embrace, fond of her charms and eager to possess, O Father, if you do not yet disclaim paternal care, nor yet disown the name, grant my petitions, and with speed restore my subjects numerous as they were before, or make me partner of the fate they bore. I spoke, and glorious lightning shone around, and rattling thunder gave a prosperous sound. So let it be, and may these omens prove a pledge, said I, of your returning love. By chance, a reverend oak was near the place sacred to Jove and of Dodona's race, where frugal ants laid up their winter meat, whose little bodies bear a mighty weight. We saw them march along and hide their store, and much admired their power, admired at first, but after envied more. Full of amazement, thus to Jove I prayed, O grant, since thus my subjects are decayed, as many subjects to supply the dead. I prayed, and strange convulsions moved the oak, which murmured, though by ambient winds unshook. My trembling hands and stiff erected hair expressed all tokens of uncommon fear. Yet both the earth and sacred oak I kissed, and scarce could hope, yet still I hoped the best. For wretches whatsoever the fates divine expound all omens to their own design. But now 'twas night, when even distraction wears a pleasing look, and dreams beguile our cares. Lo, the same oak appears before my eyes, nor altered in his shape nor former size. As many ants the numerous branches bear, the same their labor and their frugal care. The branches too a like commotion sound, and shook the industrious creatures on the ground, who by degrees, what scarce to be believed, a nobler form and larger bulk received, and on the earth walked an unusual pace, with manly strides and an erected face. Their numerous legs in former color lost, the insects could a human figure boast. I wake, and waking find my cares again, and to the unperforming gods complain, and call their promise and pretenses vain. Yet in my court I heard the murmuring voice of strangers, and a mixed uncommon noise, but I suspected all was still a dream, till Telamon to my apartment came, opening the door with an impetuous haste. "O come," said he, "and see your faith and hopes surpassed." I follow, and confused with wonder view those shapes my presaging slumbers drew. I saw and owned and called them subjects. They confessed my power, submissive to my sway. To Jove, restorer of my race decayed, my vows were first with due oblations paid. I then divided with an impartial hand my empty city and my ruined land, to give the newborn youth an equal share, and call them Myrmidons, from what they were. You saw their persons, and they still retain the thrift of ants, though now transformed to men. A frugal people and inured to sweat, laboring to gain and keeping what they get. These, equal both in strength and years, shall join their willing aid and follow your design. with the first southern gale that shall present to fill your sails and favour your intent. With such discourse they entertained the day. The evening passed in banquets, sport, and play. Then, having crowned the night with sweet repose, Aurora with the wind at east arose. Now Pallas' sons to Cephalus resort, and Cephalus with Pallas' sons to court. To the king's levee, him sleeps silken chain, and pleasing dreams beyond his hour detain. But then the princes of the blood in state expect and meet them at the palace gate. The story of Cephalus and Procris. To the inmost courts the Grecian youths were led, and placed by Phocus on a Tyrian bed, who soon observing Cephalus to hold a dart of unknown wood, but armed with gold. None better loves, said he, the huntsman's sport, or does more often to the woods resort. Yet I that javelin stem with wondering view, too brown for a box, too smooth a grain for you. I cannot guess the tree, but never art did former eyes behold so fair a dart. The guest then interrupts him. 'Twould produce still greater wonder if you knew its use. It never fails to strike the game, and then comes bloody back into your hand again. Then Phocus each particular desires, the author of the wondrous gift inquires, to which the owner thus with weeping eyes and sorrow for his wife's sad fate replies. This weapon, hero prince, can you believe? This dart the cause for which so much I grieve. I shall continue to grieve on till fate afford such wretched life no longer date. Would I this fatal gift had ne'er enjoyed, this fatal gift my tender wife destroyed. Procris her name, allied in charms and blood, to fair Orythia courted by a god. Her father sealed my hopes with rites divine, but firmer love before had made her mine. Men called me blessed, and blessed I was indeed. The second month our nuptials did succeed, when, as upon Himitius' dewy head for mountain stags my net betimes I spread, Aurora spied and ravished me away, with reverence to the goddess, I must say, against my will. For Procris had my heart, nor would her image from my thoughts depart. At last enraged she cried, Ingrateful boy, go to your Procris, take your fatal joy. And so dismissed me, musing as I went what those expressions of the goddess meant. 1,000 jealous fears possessed me now, lest Procris had profaned her nuptial vow. Her youth and charms did to my fancy paint a lewd adulteress, but her life a saint. Yet I was absent long. The goddess too taught me how far a woman could be true. Aurora's treatment much suspicion bred. Besides, who truly love, even shadows dread. I straight impatient for the trial grew, what courtship backed with richest gifts could do. Aurora's envy aided my design, and lent me features far unlike to mine. In this disguise to my own house I came, but all was chaste, no conscious sign of blame. With 1,000 arts I scarce admittance found, and then beheld her weeping on the ground for her lost husband. Hardly had I retained my purpose, scarce the wished embrace refrained. How charming was her grief! Then Phocus guessed what killing beauties waited on her dress. Her constant answer, when my suit I pressed, Forbear, my lord's dear image guards this breast. Where he is, whatever cause detains, whoe'er has his, my heart unmoved remains. What greater proofs of truth than these could be? Yet I persist and urge my destiny. At length she found, when my own form returned, her jealous lover there, whose loss she mourned. Enraged with my suspicion, swift as wind, she fled at once from me and all mankind. And so became her purpose to retain a nymph and huntress in Diana's train. Forsaken thus, I found my flames increase. I owned my folly, and I sued for peace. It was a fault, but not of guilt, to move such punishment, a fault of too much love. Thus I retrieved her to my longing arms, and many happy days possessed her charms. But with herself she kindly did confer what gifts the goddess had bestowed on her. The fleetest greyhound with this lovely dart, and I of both have wonders to impart. Near Thebes a savage beast, of race unknown, laid waste the field, and bore the vineyards down. The swains fled from him, and with one consent our Grecian youth to chase the monster went. More swift than lightning he the toils surpassed, and in his course spears, men, and trees o'ercast. We slipped our dogs, and last my Lelaps too, when none of all the mortal race would do. He long before was struggling from my hands, and ere we could unloose him broke his bands. That minute where he was he could not find, and saw only the dust he left behind. I climbed a neighboring hill to view the chase, while in the plain they held an equal race. The savage now seems caught, and now by force to quit himself, nor holds the same straight course, but running counter from the foe withdraws, and with short turning cheats his gaping jaws, which he retrieves, and still so closely pressed, you'd fear at every stretch he were possessed. Yet for the gripe his fangs in vain prepare, the game shoots from him, and he chops the air. To cast my javelin then I stood my stand, but as the thongs were fitting to my hand, while to the valley I o'erlooked the wood, before my eyes 2 marble statues stood, that as pursued appearing at full stretch, this barking after, and at point to catch. Some god their course did with this wonder grace, that neither might be conquered in the chase. And sudden silence here his tongue suppressed. He here stopped short, and fain would wave the rest. The eager prince then urged him to impart the fortune that had attended on the dart. First then, said he, past joys let me relate, for bliss was the foundation of my fate. No language can those happy hours express, did from our nuptials me and Procris bless, the kindest pair. What more could heaven confer? For she was all to me, and I to her. Had Jove made love, great Jove had been despised, and I my Procris more than Venus prized. Thus, while no other joy we did aspire, we grew at last one soul and one desire. Forth through the woods I went at break of day, the constant practice of my youth for prey. Nor yet for servant, horse, or dog did call. I found this single dart to serve for all. With slaughter tired I sought the cooler shade, and winds from that mountains pierced the glade. Come, gentle air, so was I wont to say, come, gentle air, sweet aura, come away. This always was the burden of my song. Come, swage my flames, sweet aura, come along. Thou always art most welcome to my breast. I faint. Approach, thou dearest, kindest guest. These blandishments, and more than these, I said, by fate to unsuspected ruin led. Thou art my joy, for thy dear sake I love each desert hill and solitary grove. When, faint with labor, I refreshment need, for cordials on thy fragrant breath I feed. At last a wandering swain in hearing came, and cheated with the sound of Aura's name. He thought I some assignation made, and to my Procris's ear the news conveyed. Great love is soonest with suspicion fired. She swooned, and with the tale almost expired. Ah, wretched heart, she cried, ah, faithless man. And then to curse the imagined nymph began. Yet oft she doubts, oft hopes she is deceived, and chides herself that ever she believed her lord to such injustice could proceed, till she herself were witness of the deed. Next morn I to the woods again repair, and weary with the chase invoke the air. Approach, dear Aura, and my bosom cheer, at which a mournful sound did strike my ear. Yet I proceeded till the thicket by, with rustling noise and motion drew my eye. I thought some beast of prey was sheltered there, and to the covert threw my certain spear, from whence a tender sigh my soul did wound. Ah, me, it cried, and did like Procris sound. Procris was there. Too well the voice I knew, and to the place with headlong horror flew, where I beheld her gasping on the ground, in vain attempting from the deadly wound to draw the dart, her love's dear fatal gift. My guilty arms had scarce the strength to lift the beauteous load. My silks and hair I tore, if possible to stanch the pressing gore. For pity begged her keep her flitting breath, and not to leave me guilty of her death. While I entreat she fainted fast away, and these few words had only strength to say, by all the sacred bonds of plighted love, by all your reverence to the powers above, by all the truth for which you held me dear, and last by love the cause through which I bleed, let Aura never to my bed succeed. I then perceived the error of our fate, and told her, but found and told too late. I felt her lower to my bosom fall, and while her eyes had any sight at all, on mine she fixed them, in her pangs still pressed my hand, and sighed her soul into my breast. Yet, being undeceived, resigned her breath, methought more cheerfully, and smiled in death. With such concern the weeping hero told this tale, that none who heard him could withhold from melting into sympathizing tears, till Aeacus with his 2 sons appears, whom he commits, with their new levied bands, to fortunes, and so brave a general's hands.